So a warning front and centre for this video. I'll be talking about domestic abuse and sickening animal abuse, so please click off now if this will traumatise you. Also, I'm going to take a break for a week sometime soon. I'll let you know when. It's just me doing these videos, so I need to have a bit of downtime every now and then. Lastly, moving forward, I'm going to prioritise people's suggestions. I tend to get sidetracked by interesting cases I come across, but it's important to give something back to you guys who support me. Anyway, on with the video. On Saturday the 25th of March 2023, a walker noticed plastic bags floating in the River Witham in the village of Bassingham in Lincolnshire. Retrieving one of these bags, he opened it, and to his horror, he saw that it contained a human hand. Police descended on the scene and quickly established that the remains belonged to Holly Bramley, a 26-year-old woman who'd been missing for a week. As the police investigation unfolded, it was discovered that 28-year-old Nicholas Metzen, a sadistic psychopath and Holly's husband, had not only subjected her to years of domestic abuse, including killing her pets, but he'd ultimately murdered her and cut Holly's body into more than 200 pieces. As if this crime was not horrific enough, the sentence this monster and its accomplice received will truly appall you. Welcome to Evil Among Us. Holly Ann Bramley was born around 1997 or 1998 in the city of Coventry, but grew up in the town of Holbeach in the county of Lincolnshire, which lies in the East Midlands of the UK. She came from an extremely large family. She was one of triplets and had 13 siblings. Her mother Annette stated, quote, "Holly was lovely. She was incredibly bubbly and chatty. You would describe her as friendly, as she loved being with people and socialising. She particularly loved children and animals." I'll read out a fuller tribute to Holly later, but it's clear that she was loved and had dreams for the future, including wanting to be a mother. But all of that would be cruelly snatched away from her in truly horrific circumstances. She attended William Stuckley Primary School and George Farmer Secondary, which is now University Academy Holbeach, before continuing her studies at Boston College in 2016, and it was here that she met and fell in love with a man called Nicholas Metzen, the monster who would eventually take her life, and who, by this point, was already showing concerning behaviour towards those unfortunate enough to end up in a relationship with him. There's been no information published about Nicholas Metzen's childhood or his family. What we do know is that he was born around 1996 in Lincolnshire, and in court it was disclosed that he has autistic spectrum disorder and learning difficulties. I'll expand on these terms and discuss the link, or lack thereof, between these conditions and Metzen's crimes in the profile section of this video, but it's important to keep in mind there are no indicators that he didn't know right from wrong or had a lower intellect than the average Joe. He was able to plan and manipulate using what people loved against them, and he would employ this latter skill to horrifying effect during his relationship with Holly, which appears to have begun soon after they first met in 2016. Whilst Holly seemed enamoured with Metzen, her family were less convinced. They didn't like him. They sensed something cold and cruel about Metzen. They were right on the mark. In court, it was disclosed that in 2013, at the age of around 16, Metzen was convicted of assaulting his girlfriend. 3 years later, in 2016, he was back in court again, this time being ordered to work with probation after pleading guilty to 3 counts of disclosing sexual images of another partner without permission, i.e. revenge porn. The next year, 2017, when he was aged around 20 years old, Metzen was back in trouble due to breaching a restraining order against this same victim. This information tells us a lot about Nicholas Metzen. It's likely that the assault when he was 16 years old was an early indicator of him using violence to control his partners, and him disclosing intimate photos of his girlfriend 3 years later shows him adding to his toolkit, this time emotional abuse in the form of humiliation. No doubt this occurred when this woman ended their relationship. Him then breaching the restraining order shows his disregard for the rules and for how his former partners feel. A restraining order is an unambiguous indicator that the person wants to be left alone, but domestic abuse perpetrators would ignore these. In their mind, their victim has no choice but to submit to them. This, as you'll see, is just the tip of the iceberg of the evil of Nicholas Metzen. Whilst we have no information about his childhood, it created a man who enjoyed violence, who had likely, during his earlier years, tortured and killed animals. I have no doubt, considering what he's clearly capable of, that Metzen victimised other women who likely were too scared to ever make a report to the police due to fear for their lives. Initially, Holly Bramley gushed about her new man online. Metzen was the perfect gentleman, but he was biding his time, learning everything he could about Holly, her loves, her fears, her insecurities, making her dependent on him so that he could then use all of this to utterly dominate and control her whilst cutting off any means of escape. The warning from the beginning of the video needs to be reiterated, as in this section I'll be discussing animal abuse. So we only know a small fraction of the abuse that Holly Bramley suffered at the hands of Nicholas Metzen. This is only because of what she told friends and family. We also don't know the timescale over which this occurred. The pair got married in 2021, and whilst it's likely that emotional and physical abuse occurred behind closed doors early in the relationship, it appears that after they became man and wife, things escalated to a new level. As I stated earlier in the video, Holly loved animals, and she had a variety of pets, and it was these that Metzen used to torment and control the woman he claimed to love. On one occasion, Metzen put Holly's new puppy in the washing machine, turned it on, and deliberately hung around to be sure to see Holly's heart break when she discovered the drowned puppy in the drum. Holly also told a friend that Metzen had killed 2 of her hamsters, one by putting them in the microwave and the other by putting them in a blender. On one occasion, Holly fled the house clutching her pet rabbits and ran to a police station in tears because she knew that Metzen was going to kill them. There are conflicting reports about what the police knew. It appears that Holly spoke to officers on at least one occasion, but there's no information about whatever came of this. Metzen was not arrested and remained free to torment his wife. Holly's family have stated they tried to support her, but Metzen also isolated his wife, and her mother and siblings, who she was so close to, barely saw her in the last years of her life due to Metzen's level of control, which I've no doubt he reinforced by physically hurting Holly and making her watch him kill her pets. Breaking here for a moment, it's clear, as I indicated, that the few criminal convictions that Nicholas Metzen had were nothing compared to how evil, sick and twisted he was. He used animals, one of the things that his wife loved most in the world, to control her. The fact that he was so willing to kill animals gives our first indicators of what he actually is, a psychopath. The way he ended their lives were clearly chosen to create as much pain and distress for the animal as possible. Yes, he wanted to control Holly, but he also enjoyed torturing living things, indicating he's also a sadist. So Holly Bramley was trapped in a relationship with this extremely dangerous man, likely living in fear daily that he would kill her if she ever tried to leave him. But Holly wanted more for her life. She wasn't ready to give up fighting, and she planned to leave her husband. And by March 2023, 2 years into their marriage, she'd been speaking to people looking for support to get out of the hell that she was living day in, day out. How Nicholas Metzen knew his wife was about to leave him is unclear. She may have told him, or he may have heard it through a third party. Regardless, he was enraged. Holly was his property. He would do whatever he wanted to her, and she would stay. That was her job. No way he was going to relinquish that control, allow her to move on with her life, find another man. If he couldn't have her, he would make sure no one ever would. By 2023, Holly Bramley and Nicholas Metzen were living in a flat on the 14th floor of Shuttleworth House in the city of Lincoln. On the evening of Friday the 17th of March 2023, Holly entered the tower block for the last time. CCTV was played in court, which has not been released at the time of recording, showing her holding a bag of fish and chips. At 7:17 PM, Holly got out of the lift, went into her flat, and was never seen alive again. What happened next will never be known for sure, but was speculated in court based on forensic evidence. It's likely that Holly and Metzen had an argument, no doubt underpinned by his fury that she was daring to leave him. She was his property. He could do what he wanted to her, and her job was to obey. At some point, Metzen attacked Holly whilst armed with a knife. He placed her in a headlock and dragged her into the bedroom. Whilst fighting for her life, Holly bit Metzen's forearm. He then stabbed her at least 4 times in the chest. She must have been absolutely terrified and knew she was going to die. When his wife was dead, Metzen dumped her body in the bath. Over the next few days, he put his plan to try and get away with his crime into action. He put a note on the door saying that he was self-isolating due to COVID to stop anyone from knocking. He also hacked Holly's phone and gained access to her social media accounts, using these to contact her family and friends, trying to convince them that she was still alive. He relayed several contradictory stories, including saying that Holly had self-harmed and had been taken to a hospital by mental health workers and had then fled to Manchester. Sickeningly, he sent messages in which Holly apparently admitted that she'd mistreated her husband. I mean, how sick is this bastard? While standing in the flat with his wife's dead body in the bath, he was sending messages claiming that he was the victim, the abused. Metzen also sent money from his wife's bank account to his own and took this out at ATMs, again trying to create the illusion that she was still alive. He also went on the internet and made various searches including, quote, "How would you get rid of a dead body? What benefits do I get if my wife dies? Can someone haunt me after they die? And does God forgive murder?" Metzen then shaved the head of his dead wife and spent the next week cutting her body into at least 224 pieces. I say at least because this is what police were able to recover, and there were still pieces of Holly missing. This wasn't just a dismemberment, this was Metzen destroying his wife, erasing her from the face of the earth. He removed Holly's limbs and her head, but then eviscerated her and cut up each of her organs. This act alone epitomises the evil of Nicholas Metzen. He woke up day in, day out in the flat with the decomposing body of a woman he claimed to love, and went back again and again and again to further desecrate her remains. I have no doubt that he enjoyed each and every minute of this butchery. Metzen moved his wife's body parts into the kitchen and put them in plastic bags, which he hid in a cupboard. Holly's friends and family quickly became concerned. She was close to her mother and siblings, and none of them had seen or heard from her for a week, and so on the 24th of March 2023, they made a concern for welfare call to Lincolnshire police. If this had been responded to on the same day, they would have caught Metzen in the act. However, they would not respond until the next day. In the meantime, after sitting in the flat with the body parts of his dead wife for a week, Nicholas Metzen had decided to dump her remains. However, he realised he needed help disposing of the bags, and he contacted an old school friend of his, a degenerate piece of shit called Joshua Hancock. When Metzen contacted Hancock to help dispose of Holly's body, he was on bail for sexual communication with the child. This is because in late January 2023, Hancock had been speaking to what he thought were underage children online. These were actually decoys run by a group called Child Online Safety Team. He'd invited the girls over for sex, and so they had his address, and they went round and confronted him, as shown by this clip.
Point that you've been assaulted, yeah? Do you understand that? So I'm going to record this, what's going on now, it'll be recorded to my phone, yeah?
What?
So so the conversation that we're going to have now, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm going to record that, okay, for my safety and your safety. The reason why it's being recorded, right, is basically if, for instance, you fall over now and bang your head, and then you go and tell the police that I've actually punched you, well, I can prove that you fell over and banged your head because I'm recording it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right, alright. So, obviously the reason why I'm here is because you have been speaking to 2 children online. Yeah? You've invited them round to your property to have sex. You've sent them loads of videos of yourself taking loads amount of drugs, including speed, cannabis. You've invited children round to your property. You've invited children round to this property to have sex with you once your parents have gone to bed. The youngest one's 13 years old. So now do you understand why we're here?
Yeah.
You're 27?
Yeah.
So do you think it's appropriate for a 27-year-old to invite a 13-year-old round to his property for sex?
No.
So why have you done it?
I don't know, I've got really bad mental health.
You've got really bad mental health.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's other people in the country, in the world, who've got bad mental health, probably worse than yours. Yeah. Do you think that they go online and invite children around their house for sex?
No.
No. Do you know why they don't?
Why?
Because they haven't got a sexual interest in children. But you have. That's why you're inviting children round your house for sex, which is calculated because you're waiting for your parents to go to sleep. How many children online on your phone, how many people are you speaking to that are under the age of 18 at the moment?
2, I think.
2. So you know that they're underage. Do you know how old you've got to be to have sex in this country?
No.
No. Do you know what the age of consent is?
No.
You obviously know that a 27-year-old man like yourself shouldn't be speaking to 13-year-olds though.
Yeah.
You know that's wrong. Yeah?
I spent a while confirming this was the same Joshua Hancock, as he looks different from his mugshot, or as me anyway, but I found his old Instagram page, and it's clear that he posted many pictures over the years, with his appearance changing frequently, although he consistently looks like a twat. But using this, I can confirm it is the same guy. Anyway, this wasn't a case of Joshua Hancock being ignorant about what he was getting involved in. Metzen told his friend that in the bags he needed moving were parts of Holly, who he'd murdered. To sweeten the deal, Hancock was given £50. How do we know that he knew? Because the Muppet texted a friend, sending the following quote, "Just got £50 for disposing of a body." This was later recovered by the police when they seized Hancock's phone. Apparently, in a now deleted Instagram post, Hancock posted a picture of himself holding his £50, asking for girls to contact him because he hadn't had sex for ages. I assume he thought, now that he was flush with cash, women would come flocking. I imagine he was sorely disappointed. I mean, this guy might as well have gone walking around with a sign saying, "Want a body dumped? I'm your man. Call Nicholas Metzen for a reference." In court, it was reported that Joshua Hancock, like Metzen, had autistic spectrum disorder, but that he, unlike his co-defendant, had a lower than normal IQ. This likely partially explains his immature behaviour, as in bragging to his friends they'd been paid to move a body because he thought it would sound cool. Returning to the scene of the crime, the 14th floor of Shotworth House in Lincoln. In the early hours of Saturday the 25th of March 2023, Nicholas Metzen was caught on CCTV wearing a backpack, loading plastic bags into a shopping trolley that he acquired, and taking this down the lift before loading it into his yellow Peugeot car. He then met up with Joshua Hancock and drove to the village of Bassingham, around 10 miles southwest of Lincoln. Here, the pair began throwing Holly's body parts into the River Witham. Metzen then returned home and began cleaning up the scene. Literally hours after returning, officers from Lincolnshire Police were knocking on his door, making inquiries about the whereabouts of Holly Bramley due to the call from concerned family members that had been made the day before. Metzen didn't answer. He was still furiously scrubbing any traces of his wife's blood. The same officers returned an hour later, and again there was no response. They were becoming suspicious and returned a third time at 11 AM, at which point Nicholas Metzen opened the door. He appeared unconcerned by his wife's disappearance, and his cold demeanour was a red flag. Metzen said that he didn't know where Holly was, nor did he care. He claimed that she'd left the flat in the company of 2 women from a local mental health support group on March the 19th, 2 days after he'd murdered her, and that she'd returned briefly the next day to collect some clothes before leaving again. Rather than showing any concern for his wife, Metzen went into a rant about how violent and abusive she was. He showed the bite mark on his arm and claimed this was evidence of how Holly was abusing him. In reality, as I've stated, this bite mark was made by Holly in the last moments of her life, and she was trying to get away from her killer. Officers noticed that as well as Nicholas Metzen's strange behaviour, there were blood-stained sheets in the bath and a sore on the kitchen floor. The flat also smelt strongly of bleach. There was not enough to arrest Metzen at that time, but the officers went straight to the local mental health service and made inquiries to check his story. Obviously, they found out that he was lying. At 1:15 p.m, 2 hours after first speaking to Metzen, the police returned in force and began searching the property. Metzen stood watching, apparently unconcerned. He even had time to joke, saying that maybe police would find his missing wife under the bed. The saw, which had been seen earlier on the kitchen floor, was now found to have been hidden in a cupboard. More bloodstains were found. Nicholas Metzen was arrested on suspicion of murder. He gave an initial no comment interview. 5 hours later, at 6 p.m. on the same day, Saturday the 25th of March 2023, a member of the public noticed a number of plastic bags and a bag for life in the River Witham at Bassingham. Due to a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, he retrieved one of the bags and opened it. He thought he was looking at animal meat, but then he noticed, to his horror, that there was a severed human hand in the bag. The police were called, and a massive search of the river was started. Divers were able to recover bags containing 224 pieces of a human body. These were identified as belonging to Holly Bramley. Parts of her heart, lungs and fingers were never found. It took a Home Office pathologist over 13 hours to examine all of Holly's remains. DNA testing showed that the blood in the flat belonged to Holly, and despite his efforts to clean up, scenes of crime officers used luminol to show the horror that had occurred in the home, including blood splatter covering the floor and walls of the bathroom. The dismemberment was so extensive that the cause of death could not be established definitively. What could be determined was that there appeared to be 4 stab wounds on the remains, but there were potentially far more that couldn't be detected. It was determined that what had been done to Holly's corpse after her death was far in excess of what was necessary to simply make her body easier to move. A check of Metzen's phone led them straight to the front door of Joshua Hancock, and he was arrested for assisting an offender. On March 27, 2023, 10 days after the crime, Nicholas Metzen was charged with the murder of his wife Holly Bramley. 2 days later, on March 29th, Joshua Hancock was charged with assisting an offender and disposing of a corpse to obstruct a coroner, as well as sexual communication with a child related to his behaviour in January of that year. Both men appeared in Magistrates' Court and were remanded into prison to await proceedings at the Crown Court. In August 2023, Nicholas Metzen pleaded not guilty to the murder of his wife Holly Bramley at his first appearance at Lincoln Crown Court. However, on the 23rd of February 2024, just before his trial was due to start, Metzen pleaded guilty. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He threw himself on the mercy of the court to reduce his sentence, nothing more. He felt no remorse for what he'd done. By this point, Joshua Hancock had pleaded guilty to assisting an offender, disposing of a corpse to obstruct a coroner, and sexual communication with the child. Reports were ordered to be prepared, and across a 2-day hearing on the 5th of April and the 8th of April 2024, both men stood before Judge Simon Hurst for sentencing. Victim impact statements were read out by members of Holly's family, including her mother Annette, who, whilst fighting back tears, addressed Metzen directly, stating that his actions had caused, quote, unimaginable pain, which has cut so deep into our very being and left us shattered and broken. She continued, the pain of losing a child is indescribable and something no parent should ever have to go through. The thought of Holly's last moment, being filled with fear and pain, is something that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. Holly will always be in our hearts. We will never forget her and the impact she had on our lives. Your actions have forced upon me a life sentence of grief. I am sure it will be a whole life sentence. I pray to God you receive the same. The defence barristers for both Hancock and Metzen then gave mitigation to the judge, trying to get as low a sentence as possible for their clients. With regards to Hancock, his advocate stated, quote, Mr. Hancock bitterly regrets his involvement and the part he played in the incident. His involvement was limited. It begins with a number of messages sent to him by Metzen asking him to do a job for him. He acknowledges the pain and anguish felt by the family, and he is quite appalled. What a load of bollocks. He's only sorry because he got caught. There are society's underlying issues, including his reduced level of cognitive functioning, indicating that he was led by his more savvy co-defendant. Metzen's defence stated, quote, This is someone who has autism at a moderate level. It is significant, combined with his learning difficulties, neurological disorder. This is a young man with these particular problems, and what is clear is that this is someone who is, despite certain appearances, isolated socially and operates in bubbles for the most part. He doesn't make friends and is incapable of seeing the world from the perspective of anyone but himself. For all the horror of what this man did, he is nevertheless himself a vulnerable man, and that is why Holly was his designated carer. It will not have escaped the family that he does not seem to have demonstrated any remorse. With his autism and other disorders, he has a highly restricted capacity for remorse. He has profound difficulties to empathise with others and read the feelings of others. We'll get into more detail why this is bullshit later, but suffice it to say, Metzon's defence was trying to gain sympathy, exactly the same thing which he himself did after murdering his wife, including showing the bite mark on his arm and claiming it was evidence that Holly was violent, rather than evidence of her final struggle for life. The specific sentencing remarks have not been published, but before I tell you what these men got, I want to know what sentence you think they should have received. I discussed this with a friend of mine before the sentence and came up with the following. With Metzon, he was convicted of murder, which is an automatic life sentence, so it's just a matter of how long he'd serve before he could apply for parole. I guessed at least 35 years, due to the brutality of the murder itself, butchering Holly's body, his lack of remorse, and his previous convictions related to victimising women and his obvious sadistic behaviour, including killing animals. Essentially, Nicholas Metzon is a very dangerous man and should be locked up for as long as possible. With Joshua Hancock, he knowingly helped a man dispose of the remains of a woman who had been murdered. Regardless of any underlying issues he has, he knew that he was doing wrong. He also committed his offences whilst on bail for sexual communication with a child, which he also had to be sentenced for. So tossing all of that up, I thought he would get around 10 years in prison at least. So I had life with a minimum 35 years and 10 years. What did you come up with? As to what they actually got, for murdering Holly Bramley, dismembering her and dumping her body, Nicholas Metzon got life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of just 19 years and 316 days in prison before he can apply for parole. He was 28 at the time of his sentencing, so he'll be in his late 40s when he can make his first bid for freedom. With regards to Joshua Hancock, for knowingly helping to dispose of Holly's remains, treating her like rubbish, as well as grooming underage children online, he was sentenced to just 3 years and 3 months in prison, or 39 months, as well as being put on the sex offender register for 10 years. He'll be released sometime in late 2025. These sentences are actually appalling. The fact that Metzon ever has a chance of release, given what he's done, is disgusting, and also a massive mistake, because, as I'll get to, if given the opportunity, he will kill again. Outside the court, Holly's sister, Sarah Jane Lindup, read out a statement on behalf of the family. This must have been such a bittersweet moment. Yes, her killer was behind bars, but for nowhere near long enough, and regardless of what anyone said or did, Holly was still dead. Nothing could change that. I want to read out most of the statement, as it's beautifully written, and highlights just how loved and special Holly was, and how her death devastated so many. Quote, "Today is a mixture of emotions for us, as we see that justice has finally been served after losing our vibrant, happy, and affectionate daughter, sister and aunt in such a barbaric and heinous way 12 months ago. The loss of Holly is still raw, as we've come to learn more and more of what happened to her before and after her tragic death. Today is by no means closure, but it is a milestone in the process of our grief and healing. Our dear sweet Holly was a beautiful, caring, innocent soul who had kindness and warmth that affected everyone she met. She loved to sing, dance, had a passion for animals, and was rarely seen without a smile on her face. Her vibrant spirit and infectious laughter filled our lives with joy. She was truly special. She adored her younger brothers, nieces and nephews, and wanted nothing more than to become a mother herself one day, to have children of her own to dote on and shower with love. She has so many family and friends who love her, who are now left feeling truly devastated that she is no longer here to live the long and happy life she deserved. Sadly, meeting the man who cruelly took her life was just the beginning of a rocky road for Holly as she embarked on a life of domestic abuse. And despite our trying as a family, we never managed to save her from that. We as a family are asking and encouraging anyone living with domestic abuse to seek support and tell someone. The story of Holly Brownlee was not publicised to any great extent, and this is awful, as I believe that the faces, names and stories of every victim of domestic murders, both male and female, should be in every paper so they're not forgotten and people are shown just how horrific this issue is, so they take it seriously and can spot the signs of an abuser. On average, 2 women a week in the UK are killed by a partner or former partner, and there's more coverage in the papers about reality TV stars than them. We need to remember these men and women. Her name was Holly Ann Bramley. She died on the 17th of March 2023 at the age of just 26 years old. Rest in power, Holly. So as a starting point, I need to highlight the 2 conditions Nicholas Metzen was described as having in court and explain what they mean. Metzen is reported to have had autistic spectrum disorder as well as learning difficulties. So with autism, this is a neurological and developmental disorder which affects how people view the world, communicate with others, learn and behave. Common features of those with autism include finding it hard to understand what others are thinking or feeling, getting very anxious about social situations, finding it hard to make friends or preferring to be on your own, seeming blunt, rude or not interested in others without meaning to, finding it hard to say how you feel. People with autism can have a variety of different symptoms of varying severity, therefore they're on a spectrum, hence why the term autism has now been replaced with autistic spectrum disorder, or ASD for short. It's important to point out that ASD does not negate criminal responsibility. People with this condition know right from wrong. Also, there's a perception that people with ASD all lack empathy. This is incorrect. Again, this is another feature on a spectrum. Most people with ASD are believed to have normal levels of empathy compared to their peers. They just express it in a different way. With regards to Metzen, in court his ASD was described as moderate. Whilst this is not very specific, it appears to indicate that he was able to function in life to at least a reasonable degree. I'm not sure about the States or any other country, but in the UK, unfortunately, the terms learning difficulties and learning disabilities are sometimes used interchangeably, even though they're 2 very different things. A learning difficulty does not affect general intelligence. It relates to a condition that someone may have which impacts their ability to learn new things. Classic examples are dyslexia and dyspraxia. So you can have someone who's highly intelligent who struggles with certain aspects of learning but excels in other areas. So for example, it's believed that Albert Einstein had dyslexia, whereas a learning disability is characterised by diminished intellectual ability more globally, i.e. a low IQ, so they're likely to struggle with many aspects of life. This is what Joshua Hancock seemed to suffer from, but Nicholas Metzen had to all intents and purposes what would be considered a normal level of intelligence. This makes the bollocks said in court even more annoying. His defence tried to lean on his ASD and learning difficulties to try and explain away his offending in his cold, callous presentation in court. Oh look, he's vulnerable, he doesn't have any friends, he can't see things from other people's points of view, he doesn't understand how people feel, he only hasn't expressed remorse because of his condition, not because he's a monster. I find this offensive, trying to essentially link ASD directly with violence and remorselessness. To be autistic is to be a danger to society. Instead, Nicholas Metzen is a monster who just so happens to have ASD, and I'm sure there are far more sinister labels that apply to him. The most obvious is psychopath. Metzen has no remorse for his actions, no emotions or empathy. He will exploit others for his own gain and was a skilled manipulator. This is a condition he has, which I believe his defence wrongly tries to attach to his ASD. We know nothing about Nicholas Metzen's upbringing, but what is terrifying is that it likely paralleled that of serial killers. Specifically, I think it's likely he grew up in an abusive household without nurturing, potentially being exposed to violence, and in order to escape this environment where he felt powerless, he turned to mutilating and killing animals, likely coming up with ever more disgusting ways to prolong their agony and extinguish their lives in order to feel a sense of control and power. Without this being checked, I think that Metzen began to enjoy the violence. It excited him, and this brings us to the other side of his character, the sadist, a man who enjoyed harming other living things, making them hurt, making them scream. So he had a child who grew into a man who had no conscience and who enjoyed inflicting pain and suffering. I think that Metzen's ASD did likely have an impact on his development. He's described as lonely and existing in his own bubble. I think that he struggled socially, and especially when he tried to talk to girls. They potentially rejected him. His anger grew and grew. Punishing these women became a central theme for his violent fantasies. Given his sadistic nature, I believe these fantasies were extreme, not simply killing these women, but torturing them and then dismembering them. I think like all domestic abusers, he was insecure and believed no woman would stay with him unless he controlled them, and so he sought to dominate Holly Bramley. However, this wasn't just about controlling her, this was about having fun, and he combined the two. By killing her pets in gruesome ways, he could dominate Holly and place her in a position where she would be too terrified to leave him. But this behaviour also allowed him to indulge his sadistic violent tendencies, not only by killing the animals, but also looking at the disgust and heartbreak in Holly's face. To him, acting in this manner was the best of both worlds. When Holly tried to leave him, like a typical domestic abuser, he was too weak to allow her to get on with her life. She was his property, there just for him. If she wasn't his, she needed to die, and so he murdered her. I imagine that in their flash on the 17th of March 2023, he gave her one last chance to see sense, to submit to him, with him fully intending that if she rejected him, he would kill her. After Holly was dead, he cut her body into hundreds of pieces, and as the pathologist concluded, this was far in excess of what was needed to make her body easier to move. His behaviour over a number of days had a number of motivations. Firstly, degradation. He shaved his wife's head, likely removing something that she was proud of, all to make her look ugly, to dehumanise her. Secondly, the desecration of Holly's corpse was about wiping her from the face of the earth, destroying her utterly, punishing her for daring to go against him by cutting her to pieces, meaning that her family would not be able to lay her to rest. With each cut, I imagine he was angry, screaming at her corpse, calling her a bitch, claiming that she'd made him do it, that he was the real victim. However, it was also about indulging his sick, violent fantasies. As I said earlier, I've no doubt that Nicholas Metzen was in his element, enjoying every moment of cutting up a human body. I think the only reason why he stopped was because he knew the police would eventually come knocking and he would be caught. He then employed the help of Joshua Hancock, who he likely viewed as a useful idiot, someone he'd known for years who would jump at the chance to make some easy money, who like him had no moral scruples. Hancock was just another person he would manipulate and use to get his own way. Metzen thought he was very clever with the steps he took to try and convince others that Holly was alive, but he would have been caught eventually, even if the body parts had not been recovered. He was the obvious suspect, and the amount of blood found in the property, as well as no proof of life, for example use of bank cards, mobile phones etc., would have meant that I'm sure the prosecution would have been able to build a strong case against him. However, with the body parts recovered, this was made much easier. I think this is why Metzen didn't fight it. There was no argument to be made. He pleaded guilty to get time off his sentence, and he was given a minimum of just 19 years. I was desperately trying to look for the sentencing remarks in this case, but found nothing, but I'm deeply concerned about the fact his tariff is so low. I think this could be another case where as soon as there's any mention of vulnerabilities, his sentence was reduced, even if it had nothing to do with the crime. It also potentially clouded the court's judgment, and God forbid, the parole board in years to come, who may not see what Nicholas Metzen is, a sadistic psychopath who has progressed from killing animals to killing humans, who will likely be spending years fantasizing about what he's done, eager to do it over and over again. This man needs to die behind prison walls. He will kill again. So, what's your thoughts on this case? I'd be particularly interested to hear your thoughts on the sentences that were passed. If you like what I do, then consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button. You can also send a one-off donation to support the channel using the thanks button. Please like, share and subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.